Hey everybody, Jose Rodriguez here with Men of Impact, and today we have a guest. He's indirectly a man of impact here. He's a business partner of one of my students, Garrick. His name's Dmitri, and we really just get right into it and just tell us a little bit about who you are, maybe specifically as a man, and what roles you play.
Well, good morning, and yeah, I am as most men, I think. I'm a dad, I'm a son, and a brother, and I was a husband for a long time. I was married for 20 years, so have 3 kids, ranging from 25 to 28, almost 29. So probably definitely the best thing that I have going is having kids that are adults now and finding their way in the world, and definitely great individuals, great humans. So nice. I love being a part of their lives and really having them be a part of mine, and it's really great.
Nice. Yeah, it's got to be really nice. My oldest is 16, my youngest is 2, so I really struggle with gosh, I can't wait syndrome sometimes. I can't wait till you do this, can't wait till, and then I've got a couple of them that can do those things. I'm like, why did I want that? Let's go back to this, and so I think I'm getting close, knowing that I've been snipped, so there will be no more. And so my 2-year-old son, I'm really trying to enjoy every last morsel, because I know if I'm constantly focused on the future of it, then all of a sudden they're 28 and they don't need me anymore. So tell us a little bit about that, and what do you miss with your kids being grown?
I'm a big believer in trying to be present in the moment when things are happening, and I think I did quite a bit of that when they were young, and so I had those experiences. We had a summer where I worked the late shift, so I would go into work. I worked at Costco, was manager for Costco for many years, and where I would go in at 1 in the afternoon, and my daughter, my youngest, was in afternoon kindergarten, and so we'd get the other kids off to work. My ex would go to work, and then it would just be her and I until I dropped her off at noon for afternoon kindergarten, and so we just have the whole morning together in the house, and we are super tight in bonded, and I think that year had a lot to do with that, because we would just do whatever we wanted, for 3 or 4 hours, play basketball in the garage, or just hang out, or watch Disney movies or whatever. And so it was really, really fun to be a part of those things, and I was able to, either working the early schedule or the late schedule, I was able to do a lot of things, be at a lot of events and those sorts of things. A lot of times falling asleep at many of them, because my alarm went off at 2:45 in the morning for many, many years. But it was great to be there, and I think it was a good experience, and for me at least. We have to ask them how it was for them. Sure. So I feel like I was there for it, and I experienced it, and it was great.
Well, there's a few things you hit on, and hopefully I won't lose them all in my head. But the first one was being present, being a present parent. I think it's an important aspect that we all have to practice. I know personally, my wife's always on me about being more present, and of course, I'm stuck with being a father in today's society where people have access to you all the time. So I have my cell phone, and I've got over 100 students that can, chances are through there I'm getting somebody sending me an answer, asking a question, or getting a potential member asking questions about the academy. you know, and as you know, running your own business, there's really no true time off. Even if you're off work, your mind's on something, and so being present can be really challenging, but also I think it's a luxury when you get it. So I think that's really cool that you had that opportunity to be that. You know, I'm gonna assume, you know, how old's your daughter now?
The youngest is 25.
Okay, so you know, when she was in, you said kindergarten, preschool, yeah. So
five, 6.
20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? We didn't have these cell phones in our face all the time, so that's pretty nice.
Yeah.
But now you have a daughter, at least. What are the other ones?
A daughter is the youngest, a daughter is the middle, and then my son is the oldest.
Okay, so you got a little bit of everything.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
One of the things that I think about, because having a daughter and a son, you know, one of my daughters is 16, but I don't unfortunately get to be a part of her life very much. But my youngest daughter is 4, almost getting ready to turn 5, and I find myself giving a lot of anxiety about her future, obviously, because anxiety is really, we're worrying about things that haven't even happened yet. I would like to kind of pick your brain on, you know, what anxieties did, you know, maybe do you recall when she was that age and that young, and then how do you feel it's kind of come out? If she said she's 25,
Yeah.
you know, so she's probably had a couple relationships or has one now, and I mean, I don't know if it's maybe just me as a dad, but that relationship aspect, I'm coupled with, I want to make sure that I am a representation of what she should expect of a man. So it kind of keeps me to a higher standard than I would let myself be. Like if nobody's watching me, you know, I might do some things that I wouldn't be as proud of, but I know I've got a little eyes watching me and saying, this is what my dad does. This is how my dad treats other women and other men, and that want that to be her expectation, as well as, you know, her mom is her representation of what a woman should be. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, no, this is the exact answer to that question, but I think that, you know, I grew up in a household where my mom was a very impactful and strong figure in my house, probably the most impactful person in my life, in my young life at least. So I have a very strong, you know, feeling about that, or relationship to those relationships, and we also grew up in a very strict household. Like there was no room for you know, being outside the lines, or no room for doing your own thing, or, you know, having your own agendas. I mean, you had to fall within the guidelines of what was and part of that was, you know, the way we lived and being, you know, really off the grid and out. I grew up in northern Canada, so part of it was just the in-your-faceness of the environment and all those things, and there were certain things that had to be done every day on a daily basis to ensure that things were maintained, but also just a very structured environment in regards to your what was approved and what was not approved. Sure. As far as activities. So I had a little, you know, obviously we are shaped and formed by the way that we're raised, and so certainly I came into life and into being a parent with somewhat of a structured mentality, you know, with them. And so I was pretty open with the kids, and you know, had told them fairly early, probably in middle school or whatever, you know, hey, this is maybe not going to be the easiest or the funnest environment, but, you know, the goal is to get you graduated from high school without, you know, hurting yourself, hurting someone else, becoming addicted to something, getting pregnant or getting somebody pregnant. You know, we are trying to, we are on a mission here. We have a project. We're trying to get this done so that you can get to a point where you have choices in your life, where you are at an age and at a point where you know how to learn, you understand kind of the way the world works, and then you have choices. Then you can do whatever you want, be like, but let's get there. So there were a lot of things that they probably wanted to do or maybe wanted to do sooner. I remember a conversation with my middle daughter when all three of them were in high school at the same time. So they had one kid car, and my son was a senior that year. He was the oldest. My middle daughter had her driver's license. She wanted to drive to school. I'm like, why would I let you drive to school when we have a more experienced driver here in the house that has to go to the same place every day? You can't drive. Like, you'll get to drive next year because you'll be he'll be on and you'll be there. But why would we take that risk at this point when we have a more experienced driver here? She wanted that so bad, at that point in time, but it was just like, we're not going to do that. So so I think that being open and just not having a hidden agenda of any kind. Hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish here, and here's how your mom and I think that we're going to do that. Now, were we right? And we go back and talk to them as adults, and they tell their side of the story and how they perceived the things that were going on. Clearly, some of those things didn't land the way I thought they would, because I thought, I'm so much more relaxed than my parents were. I'm so much more open to things and having conversations with you and letting you kind of negotiate your position and those sorts of things. And yet, they see it somewhat differently after the fact.
Yeah, one of the unique things, I heard this probably a year or two ago. It struck me really, really well, and I'm trying to implement it in my children's lives to understand their perspective is your child's, or a child, especially since I teach kids here, is their worst day ever is their worst day ever. Where oftentimes when my child comes in, I've had the worst day. Really? Because I'm comparing it to my worst day. Yeah. And my worst day was probably far greater than theirs. Growing up in and out of foster care and in an abusive home, I had some really bad days. My children can't fathom, and so I have to kind of keep that in perspective to say it's really their toughest day, and we can kind of apply that to, I think, anybody individually, right? Your worst memory is your worst memory. That's literally your worst day, your worst week, your worst year, whatever. And it doesn't have to compare to mine, and so that can be the hard part, right? Where we already struggle comparing ourselves to others, right? And one of the coolest rules I recently learned, I think it's from Jordan Peterson's book, it says, compare yourself to yourself yesterday, not to someone else's today, right? And that can be really the hard part, but
that's a great book, by the way, unless he has a new one out.
But that's I know he's got at least one more out, but I think it's the older book. But it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying it now. I think I just finished that chapter about children, and so that's pretty interesting. So how would you can reflect now you have a grown children, maybe to toot your horn or maybe you have some critiques, but how do you think you did as a father now that they're, I would say you're not done fathering, obviously, but the bulk of the work is done. Yeah. How do you think you've done?
Well, I had an experience where I was talking to my mom, and I said something about, look at these kids. I feel like I've, kind of done a pretty good job. Like and she looked at me and she's like, that is no indication of how you did as a parent. She's like, that's how your dad and I did as parents. We were the ones who instilled in you what you gave to them.
Awesome.
So what you get to look at is when they have kids, you have grandkids, and that will determine what you instilled in them and what they were able to give to others. So the jury's still very much out, at least according to her, on how that all turned out. So,
there's still a lot for them,
so she's saying that she did a pretty good job, that they turned out okay,
awesome.
and then we go on from there. But I think that the only measure that I can use is that they seem to be relatively happy, and I enjoy hanging out with them. And I believe other people do too.
Yeah.
So I think they're people that people like to be around.
That was one of the things in the Peterson book was like, make sure your kids aren't kids you loathe and don't want to be around.
So in that regard, yes, I feel I'm pretty good about it, and they are definitely impacting me still. I mean, it's not a one-way street,
Sure.
My son is one of the smartest people I know, so I went through some pretty significant transitions. Well, I think I've had a lot of significant transitions, but about 3 or 4 years ago, once I determined or it was made clear to me that the company that I've been working for 30 years and thought that I was headed in this particular direction and was going to make it to this juncture that I thought was my goal in life, and I realized for many reasons, maybe I'm not entirely clear on what all those were, that wasn't going to happen, and that I was making a transition and there was going to be a change of some kind, and it was a little shocking. And so when I was trying to determine what was next and what those next things were, my son was one of the people that I talked to about those things, because obviously he is in a much, was in a much more of a, getting into a career, trying to decide what he was going to do in those things. So I hadn't really been thinking about those things very much recently.
Yeah.
And so he was one of the people I talked to about, hey, what next? What to do? You know me as good as anybody. What would one consider?
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely enjoyable having those people in my life, and people that know me at that, to that depth, to
I want to come back
boards.
to that, but I want to back up a little bit and just say, or ask, I mean, it sounds like everything's working and headed, but would there have been anything in the past as a dad that you would regret it? And with that, maybe in the same, maybe you can answer together, is there a difference in that answer between your sons and your daughters? Did you raise your son in a different fashion or than you did with your daughters? We talk about double standards. I personally tell my wife, absolutely there are, and there will always be, and I'm going to raise my children with those, but I also, don't have any adult ones yet, so I don't know if that's going to work.
No, I think for, in this society, there certainly is a double standard for men and women, boys and girls.
Yeah.
And so I think, you have to, or my perception was that you had to play according to the rules that were the rules, and is it right that it's that way? I don't think so, but it is, in my opinion, that way. And so yes, I'd certainly raise the girls, or there with different parameters for them than there was for my son, just because the world treats men and women differently.
And do you think would you say as a whole was equally successful, or do you think you did a better job raising a boy, or did you do a better job raising girls?
I think that it was similar. I mean, again, the jury is probably still a little bit out on that.
We could ask them both.
We could ask them,
I think
I think you probably would get different answers. but ultimately the challenges were similar, just on the spectrum. Like level of difficulty was similar, just different challenges. And they're all so different people.
Sure.
that the challenges are. My middle daughter is very hard-headed, very very stubborn.
And that could be
I'm like, where did that come from? She's like, mm-hmm.
Well, and it can be, there's that whole, that it's not gender specific, it's role specific, right? The middle child has its own unique characteristics, as does the firstborn. The firstborn is usually the leader naturally, because they have those other siblings that they kind of have to help parent, and then there's the baby. It's one of my favorite, I think, reels I see like on Facebook and Instagram, where it's usually the same person acting as the different role of each one of their children and how they would react. Like, I think one that I can remember is it'll show the oldest and the dad's like eating breakfast, and and how he puts his dishes away and everything, and then usually the middle one's kind of the aloof and like making a mess and being sloppy, probably leaves his bowl where it's at, and then there's the baby who, mom's probably feeding him, and it's kind of unique. So there's definitely that aspect in it. Now, just out of curiosity, so you said you're divorced. Where in that child rearing did that happen?
They were, so it's about almost 10 years ago now.
Okay. So teenagers?
Teenagers.
How do you think that affected you? Did that change how you parent? Did you have a pretty like cooperative ex-wife in
we were it was a mutual decision, and not a lot of animosity or anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, we used one attorney. We did the numbers at the kitchen table on the napkin, basically, and there wasn't a lot of animosity in that regard. But because there hadn't been like screaming and yelling and a lot of fighting and whatever, and those sorts of things, especially my middle daughter was shocked, devastated, caught off guard, very, very angry, really, wanted to have it be somebody's fault and blame somebody and be angry, be upset with somebody.
Sure.
And so there was, we had probably a year of pretty, tough. And she was, she was stoic more with me, very, very, angry and aggressive with her mom. It was a challenging time for probably, and I'm sure for all of them, but she was the one that demonstrated in a way that was most noticeable, and very, very significant. So, it's taken a while.
How'd that affect you as a dad? Did you question how you did things? Did you change things?
Question a lot, and I think you're only as happy as your saddest child as a parent. So when you feel that hurt and that pain, happening, it's really hard. It's devastating.
I really like how earlier you said you measured your success as a father based on how happy your children are, right? And that's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's really easy to make our kids happy. We know those triggers, like, hey, you want some candy, you want to watch some television, there's those things, but it's still really, really important to make sure that they're happy. I don't necessarily, I make jokes about my son being my only son after having 3 daughters, and of course he only has women to model after other than me. So his big sister's always playing with dolls and dresses, and he'll put them on and wear the shoes, and walk around and you know, the little jokes about, you know, is he really a boy? You know, how is he identifying? And in today's society, that can be an underlying joke. And one of the things I think about is, I'm like, you know what? If he does go down that route, one way or another, whether it's gay, you know, dressing or certain whatever, as long as he's happy and really good at it. Like, I just wanted to, that's my biggest factor. But I used to always say, to measure my future self, was to say that I want my children to make those places better. I want them to be happy, for sure, but I also want them to be a productive member of society in a way that, whether it's just being kind to others and helping others who need it, to, you know, maybe inventing some world-class thing that just makes the world cleaner, peacefuler, or something, you know, that in that aspect, and just impact other people's lives. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, engage in whatever you're doing. So that's what I try to teach them, you know, try to model for them, like, engage, be impactful in your existence, even if you're trying to slide by. You know, they'd be supposed to read, you know, a certain amount of books during the summer and do a book report when they got back to school, you know, and maybe they wouldn't read the books or whatever, and so they were going to just kind of write something off the cliff notes off the back of the book. And I'm like, that teacher's a person too. I mean, if you're just going to make something up, and make up something interesting, you know, do have a good story, do something, make them laugh when they read what you're saying, you know, as opposed to just being the same thing, and just not being creative at all, or not being engaged. You know, clearly you didn't do the process or the program, but at least, you know, do something, be you know, be present, be engaged, be
behaviorally impactful. It's an instinct, oddly enough, for humans. I mean, as a human primal species, our goal is always to survive. I mean, that's as any species is. It will do what it needs to survive, but it also will do it with the least amount of resources necessary. That's just our nature. And so when we find our children taking shortcuts and trying to do things with the least amount, that's natural. They actually have to be taught how, you know, that. I'm a big fan of delayed gratification, and teaching that, and teaching them that the work you're doing now will be rewarded way down the road, you know, and you can't see that. That's really hard for young people who have little experience of that, right? You know, a lot of times, even when I'm struggling in my mental health and feelings, like, I like to remind myself, if my 10-year-old version of me could walk in right now and see what I got, he'd slap me silly and be like, really? You're complaining? This is your life. Like, shut up. What I'd like to do is dig in a little bit more about, you mentioned your mom was a strong factor, right? But where does a dad play in?
Well, my dad was a very strong person and he was the you know, the cornerstone of the family. He was just a little bit more stoic of a person, so he didn't engage in the same way. My mom, I felt like it was a bit of a two-way street, and that I could talk to her and she would talk to me. My dad talked to me, told me how things were going to be, how the world was, how the world worked, and I listened, you know. And that was, and there wasn't. I mean, I probably had my first real disagreement with my dad, or said, no, I don't think that is the way. I mean, we had arguments like, I don't like what you're doing, or don't do that, you know, to me. But I remember our first, you know, kind of physical interaction. He used to come up to me and he would just rub my top of my head, you know, and just mess up my hair or whatever, you know. And that, as a kid, that was fine. And then as you know, I was maybe 15 or whatever, and I had my hair maybe in a way that I wanted it. I was getting ready to go out, and he came up and, you know, let's do this. And I said, hey, don't do that. I don't like it when you do that. And so maybe the next day or a couple days later, he did it again, and I got very upset. And, you know, we kind of had a bit of a physical, you know, tussle. I wouldn't say it was a fight of any kind, but I think I was sweeping something or whatever, and I had a broomstick, and so we kind of had this little wrestling match with the broom, and you know, there was that kind of testing of, you know, where are we at, you know, physically here. And so that was, I think, significant, and he definitely took that to heart and didn't do that thing again, and I think realized that, you know, there was starting to be some sort of a balance in physical power, you know, in the house, and so that was impactful. But he was, he was very present, you know. And there, when we lived way in the bush, he would go to work during the week in town sometimes and stay in town, you know, all week, and then I would come down and meet him at the bottom of the trail when he would come home on Friday and help him, you know, bring supplies up and things like that. But we had it was definitely a very you know, consistent and very consistent relationship in his, although he had a lot of evolutions, you know, through my childhood from an activist, you know, in the civil rights, you know, movement in the late '60s. That's kind of how him and my mom met. My mom was black, my dad's white. And then to kind of the hippie commune lifestyle and those sorts of things, to the extreme off the grid, you know, lived in a tent for 7 months while they built a cabin in the wilderness, to a very fundamental religious, you know, running, you know, being the pastor of a small church in a little tiny town in northern Canada, you know, during my kind of high school years. So he had a lot of evolutions in that regard, but was always all in on whatever he was doing. He was, I mean, he was, whatever he did, if there's a, you know, picture of an extremist, you know, in the dictionary, his picture would be right there. He did whatever he did all the way.
Do you still have a good relationship with your dad?
Yeah, absolutely. He is, his health is starting to decline a bit right now, although he just had a surgery that seems like it's going to have a significant impact on him feeling somewhat better. But yeah, I you know, I talk to my parents probably once a month or something like that. Still more communication with my mom than my dad. She's just more of a social person, and my dad's a little bit, and as he's gotten older, maybe he's a little, even a little bit more, what word would I use? He's a little more stoic, you know, in the way that he holds himself. So he's more challenging to communicate with in that way, but was just fairly recently, in the last 6 months, able to spend a week with him when my mom was on a vacation, and so just my brother and I and him, and then some of the time just him and I. And that was the first time that we had actually had some conversations, you know, just him and I, because my mom, being the more social person, if you're talking to the two of them and you ask a question, he maybe thinks about it for a little bit longer, and she would jump in to answer that and kind of speak for him in some respects. And so so it was really fun to spend a little bit of time and to be able to have those conversations and just kind of wade through some of those things.
Did you guys reflect on the past? Did we talk about?
Yeah, some, but you know, a lot of it was about the future or his future, especially in regards to his health, because he was, you know, in a very critical decision-making point of what are you going to do. You know,
Sure.
clearly you're feeling different, and he's not a doctor guy. He doesn't like to, you know, his medical history is he was released from the military because he had flat feet at 19 or something like that, and 50 years of you know, I take herbs and you know, do whatever and eat healthy, and that's it. And then you know, then he had a mild stroke probably 5 or 6 years ago, and then some other things that have happened since then, and so it was impacting his health. And so having to go back, you know, realize that maybe some natural remedies and those sorts of things probably weren't going to get it done at this point. And you know, so yeah, so a lot of it was about that. But we probably reflected a little bit, maybe not too much.
Does it? Do you think it's impacting you thinking about your future with your kids? Does it?
Oh yeah. I mean,
how old are you?
Absolutely. 55.
55. So you know, we think Charlie, you know, roughly 30 more years or so, right? Like, you know, and start having those conversations now before it becomes more of a.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that trying to, I guess, yeah, just take care of yourself to a certain degree, and look at what watching. You know, he was as you might have understand. You know, being a fighter, he was out there. He was very physical in the nature of the way that he was in the world, and he just made the world move to his desires and his wants. I mean, you know, we packed a cast iron cook stove 3.5 miles up, you know, the side of the mountain, and you know, took it down the lake so my mom could have a stove in, you know, in the cabin. So he would just make things happen that weren't going to otherwise happen, which I'm very impressed by, and I have, I think, some of that in me. I also know that you can only do so much of your body will only handle so much of that, and I'm sure you probably feel sometimes the impact of having done things that other people won't do, and some of that's good, and some of that you suffer some consequences from. So wanting to be, you know, healthy and try and take care of myself to the point where I can engage with them and can interact and you know, have a good time doing whatever it is they want to do.
Well, one of the things you said earlier was that, you know, that you enjoy being around your children, right? And then obviously this is going to be a biased opinion because it's you answering for them, but do you feel like your children want to be around you? Do they come around? I mean, because for me, this is one of the things I think about, because I have a really estranged relationship with my mother. My mom, albeit a little bit of a hippie, I would call her more so just a wild hare, did whatever satisfied her whims at growing up as a kid, and not often just I was the drag along, you know, and she'd been in multiple relationships. I mean, all the times I ended up in foster care was because I was neglected. I wasn't being cared for as opposed to being abused. And so I've seen a lot and experienced a lot in that sense. And I see it now with my mom, also similar to your dad, having some health concerns. She had a stroke a couple years ago. I still struggle wanting to go. I'll see her, you know, maybe twice a year, and then I start to think about that. A good reflection was, you know, she's probably going to live maybe, she lives as old as my grandmother, another 20 years, and so I'll see her 40 more times, and then every time I see her, that starts counting down, right? It starts to create that perspective. And that is what it is. There's a lot to that, but it makes me think of that in my own respects as a father. Like, man, when my children are grown, will I have been the father well enough that, you know, hey, Dan, what are you doing? You want to grab lunch? You know, you want to, let's go see a movie, or hey, we're going to go do this. I want, that's the relationship I hope to have with my children one day.
Yeah. Well, when during COVID, we realized a little bit, or I kind of maybe had a bit of an epiphany about some of those things, because we weren't able to do some of the family things that we had done, during the holidays and things in the past. My daughter, who was in California, couldn't really come up, during that first year, so I didn't see her for, whatever, 16, 18 months, something like that. So I made a commitment, and I think, had conversations with them about them, that let's really not worry about stuff, and let's really think about interaction, being our things, our gifts to each other, or whatever those might be, as opposed to, given a book or a bowl.
Yeah.
Let's do something. So like last Christmas, we went to the Van Gogh art exhibit. That was kind of our Christmas gift to them.
Awesome.
Was to do something together. And in about a month or so, we're going to a wedding down in Texas, and so we're all going to spend about 4 or 5 days together before the wedding in Austin. And so yes, I think that is something that I think they want that.
Nice.
And I certainly want that. I certainly enjoy it. And but I want them to be, them being engaged in their life is more important to me than them being with me. But I definitely enjoy them being with me, and I definitely enjoy it when they enjoy that. And I think we have that. So it's nice. very fun to kind of engage in that way. And when they're they're adults, they're spending their own money, they're using their vacation time, they're kind of deciding how they're going to spend their life to engage in that way, and to want to be a part in that way is really fun. It feels nice to have that, and to move forward with them in that way.
Really good to hear. That's something me and my wife practice as well. Is we'd rather spend money on holidays, Christmases, birthdays, as an experience with them. Like this year for Christmas, we're going to take them to Orlando, Florida, and go to Disney World, rather than buy them anything. They might open some socks, but that's about it. And because that's what we really want. We want them to, their biggest ask, or when I ask my daughter occasionally when I need a pep talk or a little boost, she's really good at doing it. I'll be like, she'll come and say, "Daddy, I love you. You're the best daddy ever." And I'll be like, "Really? Why? Why am I the best?" And she'll say things like, "Well, because you play with me." Like, she doesn't say because you buy me stuff. So you play with me. And so that's pretty awesome. As a whole, you seem really a well-adapted male, right? You had, I think if anything, we can gather to say, you'd be a good example, and probably, if we talk to your son, being the next male down, is he probably concurs that this is kind of what can happen when you have two parents, when you have a positive male role model, somebody you can be proud of that can help shape and stuff. I mean, and I hate to call it this, but I just can't think of a better term, is, the only blemish that I can see is you got a divorce, right? So tell us, so we can try to not make sure you look so good.
Well, I think...
How was that? How did it make you feel as a man, right?
I think that in my life as a whole, I mean, the things that are really challenges for me as a man, and that certainly goes into the divorce, I probably fear failure more than anything. And, being of mixed race, and just having those, that thought process that there are some preconceived ideas out there of how I'm going to be in the world and how I'm going to respond to different things and whatever. So my goal is always to prove people wrong, to prove that I can do things that maybe other people can't do or wouldn't happen otherwise. And so I fear failure always on the daily, and so whether that be in parenting, whether that be in relationships, whatever that might be. So yeah, that was a failure, and then looking back at it, like, I don't know if it was 100% my fault, but man, I certainly did my fair share of making that, because I'm just a person who, you know, I would look at things and say, well, you know, this is, you know, trying to be logical about what's going on, and say, well, you know, discounting her feelings or her needs in that relationship, you know, and just saying, well, look what I'm doing, look what I'm providing, look what I go to work, I do this, I help with the kids, I'm here, I'm available, I'm, you know, all these things. What more could you want? What more could you ask for? You know, and just it was far too late when I came to understand that, you know, if you walk into a room and there's a coat rack with a sweatshirt over it, and you think that there's an intruder in that room because it's dark and whatever, your body doesn't respond any differently because of the fact that there is no one in the room. I mean, you feel the full gamut of whatever you think is actually going on, whether that's real or not. And so I never gave her that space to feel the way that she wanted to feel or whatever. I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense to me, so let me tell you what would make sense, and let's start moving towards that, you know, because I think that's going to be better for all of us. And it wasn't true, you know.
Yeah,
and
men a lot can be. We like to be problem solvers.
Yeah.
Oftentimes women don't want us to solve the problem.
Yeah.
They probably know how to do that. They just want us to listen.
And so that wasn't a real good listener. Probably still have a lot of work to do on that. But yeah, the impact of it, yes, you know, failure and certainly big question marks, you know, like I said with my daughter and those things of how it was going to turn out and how it was going to, you know, and I'm sure it's still going to have a lifetime impact on the kids, on me, on her, because it is a real thing and it happens. So yeah, so it's so failure is the thing that I struggle with. I struggle with asking for help. You know, I just don't. I want to be the person that helps people and that gives things, and I don't want to ever feel like I need anything or that I need help. And I have a really hard time with that.
Yeah.
And probably had I taken the initiative to ask for help or get some outside input earlier on, maybe things would have turned out differently.
Yeah,
she's happy now, so I'm
That's
absolutely happy for her.
It's interesting. One thing we've talked about in the last couple of shows is one of my motivators for doing this show was, I finally took time to actually do some research on this and to get the numbers in it. Some are staggering. I found a couple different ones, but they're all in the 75th, 76th, 77th percentile. Men commit suicide far greater than women, and then I delve into, well, why is that? One of the biggest reasons, and you hit on it, is it all comes down to our self-worth and what contributes to that. And one of the big ones is men, because when you look at statistically, men don't report having depression as much as women, but yet we have the way greater suicide rate. And the big reason is because men are so much more self-reliant. We don't want to have to ask for help. We don't want to, you know, we're not the ones calling up our sister or our mom and saying, I don't know what to do, and seeking advice. And that can be difficult. Maybe that's from either how we're raised, so it can be society pressures. So that's certainly unique that you say that. I myself, I know, struggle. I don't like to, somebody says I can't do something, I love proving them wrong. And one of my best friends told me, he was like, you just like proving people wrong. You know, anytime I accomplish anything, he's like, you just, you know, and then the problem is once I prove them wrong, I'm like, all right, next. I realize a lot of times I accomplish things that I wasn't really desiring to do so. It was just somebody said I couldn't do it, so let me show you otherwise, and so that can be a challenge. One of the unique things that you mentioned now, you know, that because in that society, in that suicide and population of men, what was unique was it's actually very, yeah, when we start to break it up within ethnicities, African American, it has a greater than the general population of suicide. I think one of the studies I read also was looking at Inuit, but just in general, it just said overall minority populations, we have a greater rate of suicide, more so than the general, but even the general is still, we're talking in the high 70 percentile. I'm curious to know if there was, and there may not be, but your male role model was your father, who was also white, and I know just from having other friends and you know, you're trying to grow up identifying maybe as a black man and what that is, and I'm sure a society has its own pressures, right? Did that affect things? Did it affect things between you and your father? Did it affect? Did you struggle with, like, Dad, you're white, you don't understand, like, this white privilege type thing?
I think that growing up, most of my memorable childhood in northern Canada, where there were almost no black people, like 0.001%. It was very, very limited. But most of the small towns there are about 50% native people. And so there would be a reservation and a little town in every little area. In some cases, it was more native people and almost all a reservation. So I had the opportunity to kind of look at some of those social issues from the outside. We were more an oddity than a minority there, because there just was nobody else. So people would come with ideas from things that they saw in movies or TV and ask questions about those sorts of things. But it wasn't really, it wasn't...
Of course, you're growing up in Canada, you knew exactly what it was like to be from Compton.
exactly, yes. But being able to see kind of how the discrimination and oppression and those sorts of things affected a population from another side was an interesting way to gain that understanding. As far as to your question of having a dad who is white, I didn't notice that as much at that point in time, because he was just my dad and he had always been, and so it didn't really impact. And it wasn't till later in my life when I kind of moved back to the States, went to school in Oklahoma and then came to Oregon, even going back to North Carolina to visit my grandma and my mom's family down there, and kind of understanding how far back race relations and those sorts of things were than what I thought from being way away from it. Really, and so it was later in my life that I was working through some of those things and trying to identify too dark to be white, but too white to be black, and not having that understanding of the culture to the degree of the inner city part of it, and those sorts of things, because I hadn't really experienced any of that. Having maybe ideals or ideas that were far different than someone who had grown up or come up in that, and so as you start to interact and people are looking at you like, what are you even talking about? Like, you have no idea. You do not know what what really goes on. So yeah, it was. I think that, and this is my opinion, but I think that wasn't as big of a factor for me. He was that person. He was a dad. He was a father, and he was there. Awesome. And so that was very impactful. And I think that. It's just like, it's like learning anything. the learning how to learn part is the most important thing. Like going to college, whatever your degree is probably much less impactful than just learning how to learn, learning how to gather information, having the confidence that you can do that. So he definitely gave me those things, you know, the understanding of what a male role model should be like or could be like, and the ability to have that resource there. And so that was super impactful. Are there other things that, you know, that I've had to kind of try and figure out, and I'm still trying to figure out and trying to help my kids figure out, you know, because they're a quarter black, so you know, 2 of my kids would never have to even address that because they don't look black, but they still feel that heritage and they still have that, and so that becomes an even more complicated discussion for them because they have views and you know, ideas in that regard. And people are like, "What are you talking about? You don't have any experience."
Yeah, I'm a pretty light-skinned Mexican. But I grew up on the reservation, and being Mexican, really, that half Mexican is half Spanish and half Native. But and then I grew up on the reservation. Not my tribe, not my reservation, but really identified and attached myself to being Native as well. And most people look at me if I don't talk and or say my name, you know, a good half people, you know, see me as a white guy. But I at the same time I go around, you know, my white family, and they don't see me as a white guy. They see me as a Mexican or Native, but I can't go to Mexico and they don't start talking Spanish to me. They start talking English because they just assume I don't know Spanish. So that whole identity can be a challenge in itself. And, you know, we're not even, you know, obviously talking about gender, right? The gender reality, especially in today's society, is really, you know, a hot topic. But let's just to kind of keep it focused on men and our issue. How's your son identify?
I mean, like I said, he would not, much like you, most people would have no idea that he is even part, you know, African American or anything like that. The eye rolls. But I think he definitely feels that, you know, he feels that as part of his identity, and definitely, you know, has thoughts and feelings about, you know, the culture and his role in it, and where, you know, what his impact is going to be in regards to those things. So you know, being a young man, he, you know, he's finding his way, figuring out how he's going to be. But I think that's definitely something that impacts him.
Wow. Yeah. Nice. So overall, you know, like I said a little bit ago, that I think you're a good example of what proper upbringing and you know, can create, right? You know, it sounds like you've got, you know, 3 healthy children that are, you know, in all purposes generally successful and living a life, and they're happy, and they are still coming around and being a part of your life. You're excited to be a part of theirs. You have a good relationship with your mom and your dad. Everything generally kind of came from, you know, solid backgrounds. But so all intents and purposes, even now that we know you a little bit better, and I think this happens even with people we know very little of, most people will probably say, yeah, this guy's kind of got his crap together. But you know you up here, right?
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about you?
I'm always concerned. I'm always a little, you know, I have
your own worst critic?
Yeah, I have that fear of not being enough, not doing enough, not getting far enough down the road, not being maybe as successful as some of my other siblings, not you know, getting to we're you know, coming from well, I think men in general, but certainly kind of work ethic, a family that, hardworking, that kind of ideals. So wanting to work hard and become something, right? Get somewhere. And so having worked a long time and then not getting to where I thought I was going to get to, I felt like a pretty devastating, failure. And so then, starting out on a new path and a new business and stuff, that's there, like what if this doesn't work out? What if I don't get it right again? And then what does that make me? Like you can go through your whole life and you can think, yeah, you did okay, but then you really never did it. You never got there. You never made it. And we're so, I think a lot of men anyway, I think are so identify themselves with what they do. So much. So that's a big part of the identity is who you are because of who you work for, what you do as your day to day,
your accomplishments.
Yeah, and so that definitely concerns me, and that's the thing that I think about is how and I want to be that person that my parents are like, oh yeah, this is my son and he does blah 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 and he's he's successful or whatever, and I want my kids to be like, hey, this is my dad and he did this and then he did this. That means a lot to me, and so. That story is certainly unwritten or uncompleted at this point, and in some regards, I feel like so far it has not been what I would have liked it to be, and it hasn't worked out as well as I would have liked it to. And that's a hard thing to say, right? Because you say your 10-year-old self would smack you around if it saw you now and be like, what are you complaining about? And I think that I could say the same thing, but I felt like I was willing to put in the effort and do more and work harder, and why didn't it work out better?
Right.
Why didn't I get to where I wanted to go? So that's the fear, the concern, the pieces that are still always in play.
So you're competing with that future self, that idealistic person you created, that you want to become.
Yeah. And the expectations that I think other people have for me, that I'm fortunate, right? I had all those things that a lot of people don't have. I had a good upbringing.
You don't have any excuses.
I had a family. I've got parents that are there. I don't have all my siblings are successful. There's no one leaning on you or asking for this or that, or there's no big problems. Certainly we have among siblings, we have things we need to work through and all those things. But you had all the springboard you could ask for. Why? If you fail now, what
greater pressure?
Yeah, what was it all for? So to make my parents proud for what they put into it, to make my kids believe that what I preached and what I said was real, that that you could do it if you put your mind to it, if you were disciplined and so all those things. Yeah, so it's a lot. It's a consistent pressure to perform.
Do you do anything to help cope with any of that?
My one of the things, and I'm not just saying this because we're in a gym. One of the things that I really
technically an academy.
Okay, all right. We're at school here. I'm a big believer in giving yourself some sort of an outlet that is physical enough that it requires your entire focus, consistently.
You need to try jiu-jitsu.
Maybe not every day, but so that you're at a point where you can kind of turning off your computer and just letting it restart and kind of that it takes everything that you've got so that you can let all that stuff go out of your mind, at least for a minute, or
get off that proverbial treadmill.
Yes,
in your head.
yes, absolutely. And so to me, that's very helpful. I'm not. I have tried meditation and some of those things. I'm not really very good at that. My mind wanders when I'm quiet.
You probably weren't good at working out the first time.
So yeah, no.
Takes practice.
But you know, the more physical endeavors, the have really helped with that. I grew up playing hockey, you know, so I was kind of pretty active. Well, I mean, even as a kid, we were out in the bush doing whatever. So yeah, that's been a really one of the bigger coping mechanisms. But then, you know, like to read and get other people's opinions on things and kind of try and have a broader perspective, even if I don't necessarily think that's the way. It's interesting to see what other people think.
It's really unique. What I found since I started the Men of Impact group, because we meet a couple times throughout the year and kind of pout. That's kind of part of the reason that this idea came about, was I kind of realized that a lot of us struggle with the same thing in our head, but we all come from different backgrounds. Yet we still, it's kind of like you can have the same product, but come about it in different aspects, and that's kind of like what our challenges are as a man, is these different aspects, right? And so it's really, really unique to hear a different perspective. You know, somebody, like you said, most springboards, you know, I'm not saying your life was super easy, but it obviously seemed to be, you were well cared for and raised, and that's credit to your parents, and maybe they didn't have that, and I kind of hope that I'm providing that for my children as a respect that I didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the unique things, I think it's a Chris Rock clip. He talks about men are the only things that are loved with conditions. Everything, you know, women, children, even pets are loved unconditionally, and we're loved under the condition that we provide in some aspect. And part of it, I think, and I want to relate this similar to stereotypes of race, because my opinion, and a lot of stereotypes, we keep a lot of our own stereotypes alive, because I grew up thinking what a migrant farm worker was, and thought that was, you know, aspects. And so, and I think we do that as men in ourselves. We grow up to think what men are, what this stereotype is, and then of course we want to live up to it. And you know, you may not have a wife or a child at home asking you to provide anymore, but yet you still feel that you're placing that upon yourself, right? We some of our own mental health issues can be we're placing those expectations on ourselves, right? And I've done that. I was once a young man making six figures, had it all, you know, car, boat, several houses, jobs, everything. And then I looked around and I was 320 pounds. And I was not happy. I was stressed out, and I was, you know, filling that void with food.
Yeah.
And eventually came around to becoming a minimalist, and that helps put in that perspective of expectation. You know, because one of the things you said earlier is that you really measuring your success as a father, whether your children are happy, right? And you may even take another step and ask them, you know, double check, are you happy? What, you know, and I just want to make sure that I'm being a good father, and they might provide you feedback of saying, well, Dad, we're great, we're happy, and we also maybe want you to be happy, right? So maybe you know, at 55, you know, you're just slightly older than me, I kind of say we're halfway. We're in that halfway point, but that first half, we maybe had half control of that, right? The rest was influenced by our parents, our surroundings. The second half, it is all me. I get full control over it, and so I can determine what my success is. And And
absolutely. And I think, you know, a couple of things that I took a year off between the time I left my previous job and started this, and just really spent some time. And two of the really things that I learned during that time were, you know, is one that moment between stimulus and response, you know, is free will, and you have a choice whether you're being punched in the face or whether you're making a career decision or whatever it is. Right in between there, you have a choice to decide how you're going to respond to that and what you're going to do. So you do have a choice in everything. And the other thing was, you know, we are what we repeatedly do. So there's no can't teach an old dog new tricks or whatever. You can do whatever you want. If you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to repeatedly act in a certain way, you will change. And I was late, always. And I preached lateness to my kids. I used to tell my kids, we don't go to the doctor's office 15 minutes early. We get there, you know, 1 minute early. We're paying the doctor's not paying us. We're not going to sit in the lobby for 20 minutes, you know, after the time. Like that was my mentality. Like, we are the most important thing. We do what we want to do, you know, those sorts of things. And so I had to really come to understand that, you know, it's very disrespectful to be to other people's time and their operation, what they're doing, be late all the time, you know. 10, 15, 30, 45, whatever, and push other people's schedules around to cater to you. So I really made an effort to try to change that. Now, I still have a tendency to be a late person, but I also put the actions in place to be on time often. And I found that very often I am on time because I practice being on time. And so you can do whatever you want, you know, and you just have that option. And there's nothing that says that because I was this way or because I thought this was the way to do things and now I understand or see the world differently, that I can't just do things differently.
Absolutely.
My tendencies I come from a late family. That's my natural resting state, is to be tardy. But I don't have to act that way. I can choose to do something different.
I think you and my wife come from the same aspect, because I was raised, if you're not early, you're late. So I tend to be really early for everything, and but to add or to all that is one of the things I like to think about regularly. And especially because I impact children and even adults. I'm teaching and coaching adults jiu-jitsu, and a lot of jiu-jitsu transfers into life aspects, because it's literally, you're struggling and you're learning to fight and defend yourself. Well, you can say you do that in many aspects of your life, is you have to fight for whatever it is you want and defend yourself when maybe what you want isn't what other people want. And but how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you shortcut certain things, you'll shortcut most things. And picking up that little bit of effort, you know, and I really try to raise the kids here, the students here, to give black belt effort. And one of them is, when you walk by a piece of trash, don't scoff at it. You know, some people are like, oh, look at that, people pick it up. Right? And I love seeing my little girl, anytime she sees trash, she'll grab it, but she'll put it in. Dad, that's black belt effort. So she might be motivated just to make me happy, but I'll take it for now. But I think that's about all the time we have. It probably ran a little long, but it was great talking to you. You provided, I think, a lot of insight to the people that watch, that some of the things you're struggling with are just, unfortunately, factors of being a man. I think some of it may be society imposed. Some of it is certainly self-imposed. But we all come from different backgrounds, being raised differently, and it creates challenges, but I also think it creates skill. You know, and one of the things that I'm kind of hoping for is I'm a fighter. I grew up being a fighter, and literally became a fighter because I had to, but it created an innate skill set to withstand hardships, and I want to give that to my children. But without the scars that come with it, right? And I, it'll be unique to see how I do that. But I think hopefully our listeners got some stuff, but I certainly did quite a bit, and I really appreciate you coming in for your time. And I will say he was early, so he was maybe he overcoming that challenge. But to close, do you have any advice for our listeners in regards to mental health? Maybe a reflection of your own, or just what you would add?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think that probably those two things that I mentioned, well, maybe three. Do something hard on a regular basis. It will help reset your mind to understand that if your work, say, is the hardest thing that you do every day, it's going to be grueling. Do something harder, so that makes those
Works
things
doesn't look so hard.
So it makes those things seem easier, because perspective is everything in life. Always know that you have a choice. Doesn't matter if you're upset, doesn't matter if you're tired, doesn't matter what's going on in your life. Stimulus, choice, response. You always have that thing in there, and you can decide. We are what we repeatedly do, so you decide who you're going to be every single day. And so if you want to be whatever, do it, be it, because you can.
Nice. That stimulus, choice, response, actually, it's really coincides in behavioral. When we were working with children who had behaviors and stuff, we would often tell the parents about the ABCs. So there's the antecedent, what happened that then caused the behavior, and then what's the consequence or the result of the behavior, right? And if your the behavior is your choice, right? You chose to act in response to this thing, but the outcome will encourage or discourage that behavior, because consequence isn't always negative, it can be positive, right? And so we can apply that to ourselves. So if you don't like the outcome very much, then hopefully it will, you'll change that behavior. So thank you very much, Dmitri. Appreciate you.
Thank you. It was nice to hang out with you for a little bit.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for watching, guys.
Yeah. Have a good